Welcome everyone. I am Brenda Zeda-Radido and this is Africa Matters. Now, from disrupted supply routes to rising global fuel prices, the impact of the US-Israel attacks on Iran is being felt far beyond the Middle East. Now, food, transport, fertilizer prices are rising globally and across the continent as the war enters its third week. And the war in the Middle East began when the United States and Israel launched attack on Iran on February 28th, killing the country's supreme leader. They've since targeted Iranian missile infrastructure, military and nuclear sites, also hitting oil refineries in recent days. Iran and pro-Iranian groups have responded by carrying out widespread missile and drone attacks on Israel and U.S. allies and bases in Gulf states, as well as civilian sites and energy facilities, with fighting spreading to Lebanon. Now, Tehran has threatened to attack any vessel that passes through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest energy shipping lanes. Global oil prices have spiked to over $100 a barrel, and even oil-producing countries like Nigeria are feeling the squeeze, as Kubra Akoch reports.
The US-Israel war on Iran is thousands of kilometers away from Nigeria, but it sent fuel prices soaring from around 760 naira per liter, or 55 US cents, to as high as 1,300 naira, which is about $1, in just a few weeks.
I pray God intervene in the war so that it will come to an end, because this fuel scarcity or fuel increments now, it will affect everybody. It will make foodstuff to go up, a lot of things will go up, transportation will also go up.
Before the assault on Iran began, around 20 million barrels of oil per day, which is a fifth of global consumption, moved through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, traffic has come to a virtual standstill in the small stretch of sea between Iran and Oman after several commercial ships were hit. Even though Nigeria produces its own crude oil, fuel prices still track global markets.
Oil prices have increased, freight prices have increased, but at the same token, the profitability and margin to a refiner has increased even more. This higher inflation will impact the end consumer in a whole different number of ways. Costs for travel will increase. Costs for groceries, in terms of the cost of getting groceries into supermarkets, will increase as well.
Nigeria's Dangote refinery says it will prioritize local supply, but has increased the wholesale prices of gasoline and diesel by about 7.5 US cents, which is a 13% rise. Latest data shows Dangote recently supplied 4.1 million liters of gasoline to the local market, just over two-thirds of Nigeria's daily demand. The refinery says it is buying more Nigerian crude oil, which is currently up to $6 more expensive per barrel than Brent crude oil.
What we can assure, what is in our control, is that we will continue to ensure that Nigeria enjoys fuel abundance of high-quality fuels, but at internationally commodity-related benchmark pricing.
US President Donald Trump has tried to calm the energy market, but until the war ends, even households in oil-producing countries are feeling the pinch. Kubra Akoch, Africa Matters.
But could the global oil crisis benefit some African countries? Now, the continent produces over 7 million barrels of crude oil per day. Nigeria is Africa's largest producer of crude oil, with at least 1.3 million barrels every day, followed by Libya, producing about the same. Angola produces 1 million barrels per day, while Algeria and Egypt produce 900,000 barrels and 500,000 barrels per day, respectively. Farmers globally and in African countries who rely on nitrogen fertilizer from the Persian Gulf have also been affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Shipping companies are now forced to use a longer route via the Cape of Good Hope, leading to an increase in freight costs. This could translate to higher food production costs and in local markets. Also at risk is a critical lifeline. Humanitarian aid also passes through the Strait of Hormuz or through airspace in the Gulf region. Now, both have been disrupted by the airstrikes, blocking the delivery of humanitarian aid heading to African countries.
Straits of Hormuz, these will damage our humanitarian supply chains, reduce the humanitarian supplies we can get to people who need them, but they'll also drive up energy costs, food costs across the region.
UN data shows about 3.6 million people from African countries work in the Middle East, and the war could affect remittances, which many families and governments rely on. There are also fears that infrastructure investments and mediation efforts by Gulf countries are now being redirected inward to deal with the fallout of the regional war. Now let's hear more from Uche Igwe. He's a visiting fellow, London School of Economics, and he joins me from Brighton in the UK. Thank you for joining us here on Africa Matters. Now, Igwe, some African countries have already seen higher fuel prices, which affect everything else. How do you see it playing out and affecting Africans as the war continues?
Well, I think that fuel inflation, as you know, affects everything from food supplies, costs, and livelihood costs. So what you're saying, there's a general inflation in the continent arising from the war. And it is the countries in Africa that are dependent of fuel importation are those that are hit more. The implications on countries that import fuel obviously are more. But like the reporter said, it affects everything from food supplies to transportation costs to livelihood costs to really everything. So you see a trend of general inflation across the continent.
Some African governments saying they have enough oil reserves to serve their citizens. So when they say we have enough oil reserves, what is enough actually that can push, that can actually push some of these countries for a longer period of time?
Well, the thing is that here that they have some countries who say that they have reserves. Nobody knows when the war will end. There's a lot of uncertainty hanging. There's a lot of instability. So yes, some countries may still have oil reserves, but nobody can say whether that will be enough. Even those who have oil reserves, like Nigeria, what you see is that there is a general inflationary trend. In Nigeria, for instance, Dangote refinery, which is an indigenous refinery, has already increased the price of pre-pump price of fuel, which obviously will impact on everything from transportation to food to everything. So the inflationary trends, no country in Africa, in my view, is insulated from the inflationary trends. It is general and it's impacting on everyone.
Earlier on, you had begun explaining to us how can oil-producing countries on the continent and maritime imports benefit from the current spike in oil prices. And as you answer that, what alternative routes are there and, that African countries can rely on when exporting the crude oil?
Yeah, the basic thing is that the Strait of Hormuz, as they call it, 20% of oil transport, the past. That disruption automatically has forced increase in prices. So it is for the countries like Nigeria, Libya, Angola to benefit from it because like I did say earlier, the price of oil as of today has moved to between 4 barrels per day. As you know, it was far lower than 100. There is some money to be made, and African countries that produce crude oil have opportunities to get more resources. And like I said, in Nigeria, where I come from, there is a possibility of the country getting as much as 2.3 to 3 trillion naira in the short term. And if the war continues, there are estimates of about up to 30 trillion in terms of additional revenue that will come from the increment in prices. Of course, other countries like Egypt, Angola, Libya will definitely also benefit because they are oil exporting countries.
And Igwe, how will the Iran war impact Africa's trade, economic growth and local currencies if it drags on?
Well, it will impact on it positively and negatively. Like I did say positively, African countries that export crude oil will benefit, and of course, those who import petroleum products will be impacted negatively. However, there are other implications, and we do not want to make sure that it is just about energy crisis. There are security implications of the war in Iran. For instance, in a country like Nigeria, you have about 3 to 10 million Shiite Muslims. Movement of Nigeria, IMN. And when some of these, when the crisis started, there were all kinds of across the country forcing a security alert application on the country, like Nigeria. Also, as you know, there's been a lot of flight disruptions. The aviation sector has been negatively impacted. The Many of those who travel from Nigeria into Europe and elsewhere pass through the Middle East, and with the situation in Qatar and Dubai, it means that many flights are grounded, and has also forced, inflation and rise in prices in terms of transport costs and everything. Again, beyond transport costs, about 100,000 to Nigerians are estimated to be Qatar, less than that, about 80 to 100,000 live in a country like UAE. And diaspora remittances have been impacted. In fact, there are friends of mine who could not travel, who are currently in UAE, that are in transit to other countries. So yes, aviation disruptions will have major economic implications. And again, disruptions in diaspora remittances will have a lot of implications on countries in Africa, especially in Nigeria. So there's a whole lot.
So, Igwe, just from what you're saying then, it means at the end of the day, the currency reserve exchange will also be affected. Not just for the African continent, but globally, in terms of, diaspora remittance.
Yes, it will be affected because diaspora remittances will continue to drop. Very little is going on, and there are all kinds of disruptions, aviation disruptions. Indeed, when I was traveling a couple of days ago, I saw that also many Nigerians who go to for their religious programs in Saudi Arabia had to begin to, they were struggling. People travel every year for religious programs. As you know, this is Ramadan.
Right.
And with the conflict going on, some of those were disrupted.
Right.
And there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. So there's instability, there's uncertainty, there's a lot of disruptions, and it has very, very major economic implications, especially on fuel prices and on food prices and livelihoods generally.
All right. So do you think the war in the Middle East will reshape conflicts and diplomacy across the Horn of Africa, and how?
Yeah, there's a lot of positioning diplomatically. For instance, Nigeria is said to be neutral, and some countries have, gone ahead to condemn what is going on. And as it continues to rage on, countries will be forced to take positions, and there is a lot of geopolitical reshuffling and realignment that will happen as a result. Already, because of the strong influence of the United States, countries in Europe and even in Africa are sort of trying to some neutral, some because of the fact that there are implications whether you are with one side or with the other. So people are trying to be neutral at the moment, but I don't think that diplomatic neutrality will last. At some point, countries will be forced to take positions and, of course, face the implications. For us, analysts, it's a wait-and-see attitude, how long this will last and how that will shape and reshape the geopolitical arena.
All right. Thank you so much. Uche Igwe, he's a visiting fellow at London School of Economics, and he was joining us from Brighton in the UK. Thank you for your time. Well, not unlike many countries, the shockwaves from the Iran war are already being felt in Sierra Leone, where fuel prices have jumped by more than 12% per litre. Now, commuters in the capital, Freetown, say transport fares have gone up. Suleiman Bari reports from there.
Along major roads and junctions, commuters wait patiently for available vehicles to take them to their destination, and they are already feeling the effect of the US-Israeli war on Iran. In this corner of Africa, fewer commercial vehicles are hitting the road. The uncertainty of global oil production has turned local gas stations into bottlenecks, making daily movement a struggle for residents.
The rise in fuel prices is seriously affecting us, but we are not blaming anyone. I heard people saying that the source of fuel is coming from where there is a war. So that is the problem. When we tell passengers the new fares, some agree to pay, but others argue or refuse to pay the full amount upon arrival.
Passengers say transport costs have nearly doubled from 20 to 35 US cents in a matter of days. Here in Freetown, the impact of global fuel prices is already visible. As transport fares rise, commuters say getting to work or running a business is becoming more difficult. While war in the Middle East continues to disrupt oil supplies, many here worry the situation could worsen in the days ahead. Businesses are also taking a hit as the cost of goods and services also go up across the city.
It affects you a lot.
It has affected us a lot, not just transportation. Even goods and construction materials have become more expensive. For example, a bag of cement that used to cost $6 is now about $8. So the increment just happened rapidly. It's too much. So the increment is unimaginable.
Sierra Leone imports all of its refined petroleum products and about a third of the food it needs, making it vulnerable to global market shocks.
Perhaps what is more important is the impact it will have on food, which will give us, we've been enjoying as a country relatively low inflation rate, and we know food inflation is major in our context.
Government initiatives like the Feed Salon, launched in 2023, aim to boost local food production and buffer against external economic shocks. But as the war in the Middle East continues, people here say they are bracing for even tougher days ahead. Suleiman Bari, Africa Matters, Freetown.
Stay tuned because we have more stories here on Africa Matters, including...
I'm Prosper Harry and I'm in Gungu in the eastern DRC, where the constant arrival of internally displaced people is putting overwhelming pressure on local communities.
Now we head to eastern DRC now, where the M23 rebel group and government forces have been battling for control of mineral-rich regions since its resurgence in 2021. The spiral of violence has uprooted thousands of people from their homes. Prosper Heringorora met with some of the newly displaced people in Ngungu and brings us this report.
Micheline is a mother of 3 children who says they walked 5 hours to get to safety. They are now being hosted by a family in Ngungu, in Masisi territory, like 1,000 more.
We fled the war and we want help to return in peace. That is our request. Life is very bad here. We have no homes because our houses were burned down.
Fighting in several villages in North and South Kivu, as well as Ituri provinces, has caused massive displacement. The international aid organization Mercy Corps estimates that nearly 220,000 families from 5 provinces in eastern DRC have been forced out of their homes. Like Mahoro Rutare, who has been left homeless for the third time since 2024.
I came from Mituyu fleeing the war. The fighting was horrific. We took refuge in Ngungu to start over. May the war end so that we can return home.
By diplomatic effort to bring peace, led by the United States, Qatar and Angola have not yielded results so far. The situation on the front lines has worsened in recent days, raising questions about the warring parties' commitment to de-escalate. Ngungu town is now led by the M23 rebel group after seizing it from government forces in January 2025.
We're committed to the peace process. We've been going to Doha since March last year. We have made 8 trips to Doha to negotiate peace because we believe this is the way to achieve lasting peace in our country.
The Kinshasa government also says the same and accuses the M23 of violating the peace deal. But for many host families struggling to support themselves financially, peace can't come soon enough. Prosper Heringorora, Africa Matters, Ngungu, DRC.
From those fleeing war to others on the brink of one in the Horn of Africa, residents of Ethiopia's Tigray capital, Mekelle, are living as rising tensions between Ethiopia's federal government and forces linked to the Tigray's People's Liberation Front spark fears of another war. Christina Simic reports.
Even though businesses and banks are open in Mekelle, cash is scarce and civil servants have gone for months without pay. That's because federal authorities cut subsidies to the region after accusing Tigray leaders of undermining their authority. Food and fuel shortages are now common, and vendors are selling smuggled petrol at exorbitant prices. Even farmers are not spared.
I don't know what to do. I am not doing my farm work properly. I am not taking good care of my family. I wanted to cultivate additional farmland, but I couldn't. All sides are saying they are going to fight. We are confused. We cannot be sure, but we don't want war at all.
Memories of the civil war in Tigray that began in November 2020 are still fresh. The Ethiopian government fought against the Tigray People's Liberation Front after accusing its forces of attacking military bases to steal weapons. At least 600,000 people were killed in 2 years, according to an African Union envoy.
We have seen what happened before. Many people lost their lives. I myself lost my brother in the fighting. I believe young people should not go to war anymore. We have had enough. We have lost our brothers and sisters. I believe young people should leave here.
Every day, buses are filled with people fleeing to the safety of the country's capital, Addis Ababa.
In 2020, many civilians died here, not only those who went to fight. Civilians who stayed behind also died. That is why people are now leaving their property behind and fleeing. Many young people died. Those who could have had children, those who were productive. We gain nothing from war. We want the next generation to live in peace.
In January this year, fighting was reported in Cherche town in the south of Tigray. It is now reported that the federal army and Tigrayan forces have started mobilizing at their shared border in northern Ethiopia. A 2022 Pretoria peace agreement laid out disarmament of Tigray forces, return of banking services, humanitarian aid assistance and establishment of an interim administration in Tigray in 2023. But it hasn't been fully implemented, leading to escalating tensions in the region. Some Mekelle residents now fear war could erupt any time, so they are bracing for the worst. Christina Simic, Africa Matters.
That's our show this week. Let us know how the Iran war has affected you and how you're coping. You can also leave your comments about any other stories you've seen on our Africa Matters YouTube page or on X. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Brenda Zeda Radido.